Hey everyone, Jaime Sable here once again. This time I want to talk to you about assessment, and in this particular case I'm not talking about assessment for your own class, like exams and things like that, but I'm talking about how we're working to assess the whole synthetic biology cure program that we're all trying to work towards and see how it's helping our students. So I wanted to give you just a little bit about my background. This is a slide from when our faculty did a 3-minute, well, it's sort of like the 3-minute thesis. We called it Professors on Parade. And so this was my slide from that. The big thing that I want to point out here is that I do biology education research. My background is in genetics and science ed. And what that really means is that I have a lot of different things that are really moving between my teaching and my research. So when I'm teaching, I really get a lot of questions that then I use research to answer, and then the kinds of things that I'm learning in my research go back into what I'm doing in the classroom. And so I use a lot of different kinds of data, quantitative data, surveys, grades, things like that, as well as qualitative data, things like interviews with students, open-ended survey questions, and then pull those all together to do what's called triangulation, which is where we can bring all these data sources to get a whole picture. And so mostly what my lab does is work on things called scaffolds. So this is the idea of a scaffold. You can think of it a lot like you think of a scaffold that's like on the side of a building. A lot of times students we want them to get to a particular skill or idea, but they need support to do so. And so scaffolds are the kinds of supports that we can build as instructors, that we can provide for students to help them get from where they are to where we want them to be up here at the top. So within that, I have 4 major projects that my group works on. The first is called the Majors Metacognition Project. This is looking at how biology majors think about their own understanding and the kinds of things that they can do to reach greater understanding. I also am doing some work with non-majors and how they make decisions, scientifically informed decisions. I have a PhD student who is working on a plant blindness project. And then the fourth thing is the role of cures and scientific development. And so that's, I think you can probably tell what I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about today. Before I do so, though, some people always say, when I say plant blindness, they say, I've never even heard of that. So I want to just give you a quick look at that. So this is one of my favorite pictures to talk about, or to show when I'm talking about plant blindness. A lot of times when we look at this, the first and sometimes the only thing anyone ever says that they see here is this alligator. I'm not sure actually if it's an alligator or a crocodile. One of those two. But what's actually happening here is we have a ton of duckweed that is basically covering the entire surface here. Way more plants than animals here. And so we have this tendency to just see plants as a green background, and that's it, and not really pay attention to them. And that has a lot of potential problems when we're talking about things like protecting ecosystems or climate change, things like that. Now, I will say there's, of course, a good reason that we see that gator before we see the duckweed, because that gator is much more likely to harm us than that duckweed is. And so there are definitely some evolutionary reasons, but regardless, that's the idea of plant blindness. And so Kate Parsley, my PhD student, is working on how we can help students understand why plants are important and why it's a good thing for them to learn about them. But today I want to talk, of course, about the cures. So cures, as I hope you all have a sense, are course-based undergraduate research experiences. The big thing here is that most departments can't provide independent research opportunities for all of their students. You know, in our department, we have about 30 faculty, but we have about 600 students, and so 600 majors. And so it's just not possible for us all to have all of those students in our labs getting some research experience. And so with a cure, we can actually get them some research experience in a course. So it provides a lot of structure, but it's also flexible, and they have a lot of support from instructors, TAs, and their other group members. And so we can really help them to develop some of these important scientific practices in a course rather than, sort of what we typically call cookbook labs, which is our typical lab environment where students are really just following instructions. There's a certain end result that they're supposed to get to. And that's not really like science. We don't really know what we're supposed to find in science. And so this gives them a better experience with the actual scientific process. Okay, so my part in this, I've been working with Nathan to do some assessment for what's happening kind of across the board with everybody who are doing these synthetic biology labs in their with their students. And so we have two surveys. One is called the Grinnell Survey because it was created at Grinnell College. And that is a pre and a post. So we do that at the beginning of the semester and the end. And then we have what we call the Dolan Survey because it was created by Aaron Dolan, who, if you don't know, is somebody who does a lot of work with cures, developing them, assessing them, all of that. And that is a post only, so only at the end of the semester. So I want to walk through a little of these. So the Dolan Survey, I'm talking about that one first because it's shorter. There's two parts to the Dolan Survey. In the first part, there's basically 5 statements that say, in this course I was encouraged to, and then each of these 5 different things. And then students choose whether they felt like they did that weekly, monthly, 1 or 2 times over the entire semester, or never. And so I'll show you a little bit about some of our early data. So we've been collecting data for over 3 semesters so far. And what you can see here is across the top are the 5 different statements, the things that the students were able to do, and along the side are what they chose in terms of frequency. So you could see that across the board, most students are saying they're doing most of these things weekly. That's true even, we didn't know what was going to happen in spring 2020 because these courses went online way through. And so you can see that we still have students engaging. This was at the end of the semester. They still felt like they were engaging in most of these things in the semester. So that's great news. Now you're going to notice that we have pretty small numbers right here. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, talk more about that in a little bit. The second part of the Dolan Survey, it's again statements that they are saying they either strongly agree all the way down to strongly disagree with them. The various statements, it depends on which of these they're talking about. It says they were either encouraged to, expected to, or had time to. And I'm not going to go through all of these. You can always come back and take a look at them again later. But what I do want to show you is that is some of that data, what we're finding. So when the surveys come in, the students have responded from strongly agree to strongly disagree. When I analyze that, I just turn that into a numerical rating. So strongly agree gets a 5, while strongly disagree gets a 1, and obviously the numbers in between. So you can see here we're right around the low 4s for all 3 semesters, which would be right about agree for all of these statements. So obviously there are some nuances in here based on what the statement is, and I'm kind of just trying to show you here a big picture of what this is looking like. Okay, the Grinnell Survey is a much more intensive one. There's a lot more questions in it. We give that one both pre and post. So at the beginning of the semester, before they've really engaged in any of the material, and then at the end. And it is looking for maybe various things that have changed over the semester. So it's asking a lot of different things about students' goals, reasons for taking the course, their ability to do particular elements of a cure, and then their opinions about themselves and their ability to do science. So for the elements portion, the elements and opinions is what I'm going to focus on for right now. Elements go from extensive to none. In other words, they had, they have had extensive opportunity to do particular things. The opinions one goes from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And once again, to analyze these data, I again turn these into numerical scores. So extensive would be 5, none would be 1, strongly agree would be 5, and strongly disagree would be, sorry, did I say that right? Strongly agree would be 5, strongly disagree would be 1. So we can see here in our pre to post for the elements, we're not seeing a difference. And the opinions, we see a slight increase. I have not done any stats on this. I don't know if that's significant. But again, we don't have big numbers here. We don't have a lot of responses yet. So I'm not sure if we would see significance anyway. But the one thing that I think is really interesting is that for the post, on the post, they also have a section on how much the students thought the course benefited them and sort of the gain that they had on their ability to do science. So this goes from very large gain all the way down to no gain or very small gain. Again, very large gain would be a 5, no gain or very small gain would be a 1. And we can see that most students at the end of the semester are saying about 4. So a lot of students are saying for a lot of these things that they had a large gain in their ability to do science, and that's fantastic. Again, all of these have a lot of questions under them, so there are nuances and things that we're certainly teasing out in terms of all of the various aspects, the moving parts that are going on here. Excuse me. But again, I just wanted you to kind of have a sense of what these surveys are about. But the big thing is that we need your help. So like I said, we don't have large numbers yet. You know, when after AR Cure, it often takes at least a semester or a year or sometimes even longer for instructors to start running these at their institutions. And so we would ask that when that happens for you, if you would please consider having your students take these surveys so that we can continue to do some analysis and see how the synthetic biology cures in particular may be helping students. And so for that, we do have to have institutional review board approval. I have that at the University of Memphis. So it's quite possible that you don't actually have to do anything to be able to get that from yours. So because we're doing human subjects research, we have to have this. But if you just want to collect some data for your own class, just for your own purposes of evaluating your course, and you're not going to publish it or present it, you don't need IRB for that, of course. But you do if you're going to disseminate anything from that data. So like I said, I have this IRB through the University of Memphis. The surveys have the consent form on the very first page. So if students consent, they go ahead and take the survey. If they don't consent, it just takes them to a thanks, you're done screen. You might think that that means that a lot of them would not consent. That's not true. We actually have almost, not quite 100%, but very close to 100% of students that do consent to take this. But some institutions require you to also have some sort of either paperwork showing that you're collaborating with me and that I have IRB, or that in some cases you have to have IRB yourself to be able to give these surveys to your students. So you'll have to find that out at your own institution. I have, like I said, though, I've already gone through the whole process, and so I'm happy to share any information that would be helpful if you do have to do an IRB on your campus. Again, for the most part, most people haven't had to do anything. Mine covers it. So I will once again give you my contact info. Every semester, Nathan will send out the links to the surveys to everyone who is doing this. So if you just let him know that you're doing it and you want to be on that list for those surveys, that's perfect. But again, any questions you have, or certainly if you need to do anything more for your IRB, please do get in touch with me. I'm happy to help. And that's it. Thanks so much.